changing the colors before my eyes. Yesterday's arrows, tomorrow's wildlife. Scan our horizon, the clouds take me higher. I shall return from out of the fire.
Okay, welcome my chess friends, and I warmly welcome you to this video on the Caro Kann Mainline. It begins, of course, e4, c6, and d4, d5. And we learned that there is a variety of variations, but the one we are interested in is knight to c3. White must do something about his e-pawn. It's under attack, he cannot ignore it. So in this instance he chooses to defend it with knight to c3. We complete our first goal, which is the obliteration of the e-pawn. D takes e, knight takes e, and bishop to f5, developing with tempo. Now, 90% of the time, this knight will go back to g3. There is another move that I think that we should just cover briefly. And it's a move that was invented or created by the chess artist David Bronstein, Grandmaster David Bronstein. And his idea was to play knight to c5. Now this is not dangerous for black at all, if we know how to handle it. We play knight to d7, contesting the knight's presence in our side of the board. White carries out his idea of taking the pawn, and here we play queen to c7. Now the best policy for white is to go back with the knight, with knight to c5. And after knight takes c5, d takes c5, e6, we're ready to bring our rook to d8, contesting the d-file, so white plays bishop to d3. Rook to d8, knight to f3, and bishop takes c5. After white castles, we play knight to f6. And in compensation for the ragged nature of our queenside pawns, we have a lead in development, and we have excellent activity. Our two bishops are cutting across the chessboard, and we can create some weaknesses of our own if we choose to do so. So it's not dangerous for us at all, not in the slightest. If we can just go back, let's see what happens if white gets greedy and tries to defend his knight here with bishop to a6. Knight to b8. And doesn't matter what he does. If he goes back to c5, we simply take this and play queen to a5, and he has lost the piece. If he tries and defends it with queen to e2, well, we simply take the bishop, queen takes, and our bishop comes back to c8. And this knight on b7, is leaving the chessboard rather quickly. So it's not at all dangerous for us, but it is dangerous for white if he doesn't know what he is doing. This move, knight to c5, David Bronstein's move. I've only ever met this myself once or twice in playing chess. And the vast majority of times, more than 90% of the time, this knight will go back to g3. We play bishop to g6. And here there are many moves, but there are only one or two ideas. There's h4, which is the main line, and we'll cover this before we cover any of the other ones because it is the most frequent. Trying to make something of the position of our bishop here on g6. Of course, we play h6 to provide a square for it on h7. And again, there are various moves, but simply one idea. The most common move by far is knight to f3. And here we learn that we play the move knight to f6. Knight to e5, hitting the bishop is the most common move. Bishop goes back to h7. And here there are generally two treatments. To bring the bishop to c4, which I'm going to term the tactical variation, because it's trying to make something of the weakness of the f7 square. And the other one is bishop to d3, which we'll call the positional variation, seeking to exchange off light square bishops. So let us look at this move here, bishop to c4. Obviously we must do something with this point here in f7, so we play the move e6. And the most common move is queen e2. Now this comes with a threat. I wonder if you can see what it is. Let's play a move for white. Let's play this move here. It's a blunder, in fact, because after knight takes, forking the rook and the queen, black is forced to take, and queen comes to e6 with a devastating effect. If we move here, well, we're getting mated. And that is not the reason why we play the Caro Kann. We don't play the Caro Kann to get mated. We play it because it's solid. And therefore, in this position, the move that we play is knight to d5. And white has no more plans or no more successful ideas on attacking our f7 point. Queen h5 was played in one of the games that I looked at master level, trying to make something of the f7 point. Well, black can nonchalantly simply play queen to c7. In the game I looked at it, c3, we simply develop with bishop to d6. We're going to contest the presence of this knight. It's in our territory, it doesn't belong there, and we're going to neutralize its presence by bishop to d6 and knight b to d7. The game I looked at, white castled, black castled, bishop to d2 was played, and knight to d7. Rook came to the e-file, and here black played rook a to d8. Bishop dropped back, and the knight came to f6. And these pieces that look so menacing are having to beat a hasty retreat. Queen went to e2. And this threat was realized after the move knight to e5. Knight takes, d takes e5, bishop takes e5, and black has won a pawn. Now, in the actual game, knight to f1 was played. But if we just take it back, even after queen takes e5, queen takes e5, rook takes e5, rook to d2, black is entering an endgame a pawn up, as he did in the game, and went on to win. So this is the way we treat this tactical variation. We bring our knight. When white piles up on the f7 point, we bring our knight to d5, and he has no more attack on our position. It's absolutely solid. Now, upon realizing that moves like queen to h5 were not dangerous for black at all, after the move, of course, knight to d5, what white has tended to do is simply drop this bishop back to b3. And we have two ideas here. We can play the more common a5, of course threatening a4, or we can play a move that was given by Grandmaster Nigel Davis, which is an immediate bishop to b4 check. Now the point of this is that either the king will be moved to f1 and white will lose castling rights, or after the bishop comes here we can play the knight to f4, creating some tricks. But the main point of it is that white cannot play the move c3. If white plays the move c3, well, we can simply take. Knight takes, b takes, and bishop takes c3, forking the king and the rook. It's important, of course, that we don't take this rook, because if we do, let's just say we take the rook, so after this we take the rook, well, once again white gets a devastating attack after these moves here. The king goes here, well, this bishop is coming here, creating absolute havoc. So it's important that we don't take the rook. We have a much better move here, and that is queen takes d4, threatening the knight and renewing our threat on the rook. And then if white tries any tricks, well, they simply don't work, because this queen here is no longer for the board. It's an interesting and tactical idea. The problem with it is that I have not found any games in Master Play that have ever actually played the move c3. Now, I have 2 million master level games. Every single player is over 2,300 ELO. And not once after bishop b4 did any of them ever play the move, the blunder c3. So it's an interesting idea, chess friends, to keep in mind, but I'm not advocating it as a way of playing, because I don't believe in it myself. It might be good for Grandmaster Nigel Davis's chess videos, but it's not good enough for my listeners. Amateurs though we are, and by far the most frequent move is a5. Threatening, of course, to do something to this bishop here. Most common response is a4, and now we can play the move bishop to b4 check. Again, c3 is impossible. The most frequent move is king to f1. And here we can simply contest the presence of this knight. In one of the games I looked at, white tried to make something of the g-pawn. But after rook to g8, there was nothing doing there on g7. So he took, and queen takes. And here he tried something tactical. He tried bishop takes h6, because after g takes h6, you can see the weakness here on f6. After bishop takes d5, bishop to e7 and panic over. There's no more tactics here on f6. Bishop is attacked, it must move, and black's position is fine. So this is how we play in the tactical variation if after knight to d5, the bishop simply drops back. We can play the move a5. And this is my recommendation, chess friends. I actually believe in this variation. Although Grandmaster Nigel Davies' bishop to b4 is interesting in itself. It's a pity that no masters have ever played it. So we'll go on now, chess friends, to look at the positional variation, where instead of the bishop coming to c4, it comes in fact to d3. Okay, let us consider what happens in this variation that we have termed the positional variation. h4, h6, knight f3, knight f6 is our move, knight e5, bishop drops back, and bishop to d3. This nowadays is probably the most popular choice. And after bishop takes, queen takes, we have the simple idea of playing e6 and c5, ensuring that we get equality in the centre. And we have also the goal of neutralising this knight that is in our territory. Now, this game was played in 2009 between two very strong players. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce their names because they are Polish players and it would simply make a mockery of their names. So I'll give the PGNs in the description after the video is over. e6, of course. And in this game, f4 was played, trying to cement the knight in here on e5. It's our goal to contest the presence of this knight in our territory. Bishop came to d2 and simply bishop to e7. Black is simply going to complete his development and play the move c5. White castled long and c5 came immediately. Queen came here menacingly, but after queen to c7, takes, castles, gets rid of this menacing knight on e5, and the knight came to d5. Lining up here on the c file. Pawn fell, and here white tried some type of sacrificial attack. And it's amazing because black has an amazing response. After the queen comes to g3, look at this amazing move here. Bishop to g5. Mate is threatened here on c2, so the king moves. Takes. King is forced into the corner. And look at this move here. Rook to c3. What happens if the rook is taken? Let's just look at it. It wasn't played in the game, but it's interesting nevertheless. And the queen is forced to give itself up for the knight, otherwise white is getting mated. After this, it's all over. This wasn't, of course, played in the game. After rook to c3, well, queen tried to dodge, but the rook is menacing the white queen. Queen is trying all sorts of things. Position is desperate. And after this move, in fact, white resigned, because the queen cannot really leave this diagonal here. For example, if it takes here, here, and a move like this is absolutely devastating. It's attacked, it's going to be lost. And let's see, queen d4, game is over. And if the knight is taken, well, takes, queen takes, again, game is practically over. So this is the way we deal with this move. Bishop to d3. We exchange it off. We carry out our very simple idea of playing c5, e6 and c5, as we looked at in the introduction. Now, what sometimes happens, chess friends, is that white will play a move that is similar to bishop d3, but he will throw in another move prior to that. And I'll show you what it is here. This is all familiar to us. h4, h6, knight f3, knight f6. This move here, h5. He does this prior to bringing the bishop to d3. Of course, retreat our bishop and then the bishop comes to d3. Takes and queen takes. And of course we play the move e6. Now white has two ways of developing his dark square bishop. He can either bring it to f4, which seems the more aggressive line, but is in fact not dangerous for us at all. Or he can bring it to the more modest d2. But this allows us to take advantage of the move knight to f6, the flexibility of it, because we can now play an immediate c5, preparing to bring our own knight here to the more active c6 square. This is a game from 1996 with white pieces of the legendary Russian chess player Alexander Morozevich, and with the black pieces is Grandmaster Granda. Morozevich castled and Granda played knight to c6. Bishop to e3 was played, queen to b6, and Morozevich played knight to e4. Here Granda played interesting move knight to b4. Knight takes, pawn takes, and queen to c4. Knight dropped back, menacing the bishop. Pawn takes. And here Grandmaster Granda calculated that he did not have to move the queen, he simply had to take on e3, renewing the threat to the white queen. F takes and bishop takes. Here Morozevich played e4 and the rook came to the open file. Queen dropped back, and here Granda played a very original move, queen to a6. He doesn't mind the exchange of queens because after queen takes, b takes, his estimation was that this will prove to be a much greater weakness than this here. It never actually transpired in the game. Morozevich played rook h to e1 instead, after queens were exchanged. Grandmaster Granda went on to win this game in the end. But it highlights, I thought, the excellent way in which the move knight to f6 that we play in the beginning shows its flexibility. Because here we can play an immediate c5, bringing our queen's knight to a much more active square. Let us take a look at what happens instead of bishop to d3. White plays bishop to f4. Well, we can simply contest this diagonal with bishop to d6 ourselves. Bishop takes, queen takes, castles, knight b to d7, king to b1, castle, and we're ready to play c5 ourselves. It is not a problem for us, this variation at all. If instead of bishop takes we have knight to e5, well, queen to c7, white castles, knight b to d7, preparing to neutralize the presence of this knight. Some games knight e4 was played well. It is not dangerous for us at all. And we can simply castle here. So this is the knight f4 variation. All we do is simply contest the bishop's presence with bishop to d6. Now, chess friends, it will sometimes happen that white will try to confuse you with, instead of bringing his knight to f3, he will try either knight to h3 or knight to d2, sorry, e2 here. And his idea is that he is simply preparing to bring this knight to f4, where with this bishop on c4, when we move our pawn here to e6, it will prove to be a target for him. This is his idea. Whether the knight comes to h3 and f4, whether the knight comes to e2 or f4, or whether the bishop goes to c4 first, essentially it's the same idea. When we play e6, knight here and bishop here will conspire against the e6 point. But we have a very nice way of dealing with it. Let's say he plays knight to h3, trying to bring the knight to f4. Play knight to f6 as we normally do. Knight comes to f4, bishop drops back. Bishop to c4, waiting for us to play the move e6, which will provide a target for him. But here we have a brilliant move. Knight to a6. Now if bishop takes a6, we don't even need to take with the pawn, we can simply take queen to a5. And the bishop is gone, it's ours. Tries bishop d2, well, thank you very much. Now what is the idea behind this move, knight to a4? Well, the idea is to bring it here to c7, and then to play the move e6, where the knight's presence will bolster the e6 point. We're simply not prepared to create a target for white in this variation where the knight comes to f4 by playing the move e6. And this is our way of dealing with it. Okay, my chess friends, that just about covers all of the lines that I can think of. Tactical variations, positional ones, hybrid variations. Variations where a bishop comes to the modest d2 or bishop comes to the aggressive f4. What happens if white doesn't play h4? And what happens when he tries to bring his knight out to f4 in conjunction with a bishop on c4, trying to attack our vulnerable e6 point? What I'd like to leave you with is a very beautiful inspirational game from 2012. With the white pieces is Pendala Hare Krishna, and with the black pieces is legendary chess player Shakira Mamyondarov. And we know these moves already. Knight came to d2, it doesn't really matter, d2 or c3, the idea is the same. Takes, bishop comes, h4, h6, knight f3. No tricky stuff with the knight trying to come to f4. Knight f6, our most flexible choice. Hitting our bishop, bishop drops back. Bishop comes to c4. We know these moves and we know the reasons why they are made. e6, queen e2, and of course we block with our own knight. Queen h5, queen c7. We're not afraid of anything on f7. Castles, bishop d6, rook comes to e file. Mameldov castles. Queen looks menacingly at the black king, but it's got to move. We contest, of course, the presence of this knight here. It's in our territory. It doesn't belong in our territory. It has no future in our territory. Hare Krishna took here on d7. Mameldov retook. And this pawn here is on pre, and Mameldov retreats his bishop. Why would he give up his good bishop for this knight? And takes this pawn. And here the fun really begins. Because Mameldov played the wonderful move. Bishop takes on e4. Now which one are you going to take? Hare Krishna. Are you going to take the black squared bishop or are you going to take the light squared bishop? Well, he chose to take the light squared bishop. And Mameldov played this amazing move. Bishop takes. King takes. And f5. But it looks as though his tactic is going to fail because the bishop here comes with check. King moves and bishop takes. But Mameldov has this move here, but he's facing checkmate. But it's not possible because now the bishop is pinned against the king and the knight takes with check. Wonderful tactical sequence. Who says the Caro Kann cannot or does not get tactical? Saving mate. And after the exchange of queens, Mameldov went on to win a very beautiful game of chess. So I leave that with you, friends, for your inspiration. One thing I would like to say before I go, please remember this is not master level knowledge. I'm not a chess master. This is just my own research and some resources that I had, some databases that I looked at, some games that I looked at, that I thought I could share the ideas with you. But saying that, I feel that the ideas are sound, and that if you employ them in your games, then you will be employing sound and tried and tested master level variations. Well, suffice to say, my chess friends, thank you very much, and it simply leaves me to wish you well with your own chess. Take care and goodbye.
I shall return.